Lawyers, what cases are you sorry you won? I taught a class for a few years after I left practice because courtroom work gets under your skin in ways you don't notice until someone asks why your hands shake at the end of a long day. I told students that story the way I had to live it because it was the anchor that finally made me stop calendaring hearings and start writing on a chalkboard. The client was a pillar of the town. Church on Sundays, PTA on Wednesdays, the sort of man whose name was prefixed with esteemed by people who liked the sound of it. He and his wife had taken in 2 foster boys. One was easy to like, neat hair, good grades, Boy Scout badges still looped on his uniform. The other was harder, the kind of kid who had been shuffled through whispering systems and learned survival manners that looked like lying and shoplifting on paper. That kid had a file longer than his body. Accusation files begin like small storms. The troublesome boy said the foster father had molested him. The community recoiled in the predictable way that communities do when a favored image sharpens into something ugly. The foster father swore he had never touched him. The kid had lied before. Teachers rolled their eyes when he talked. The prosecution smelled the weakness of the file and the defense smelled the same thing. Everyone put their chips on the same table. I was the defense attorney. My work was practical and ordinary for the first week. Subpoena records, talk to witnesses, make sure the kids' past reports were in order, watch for inconsistencies. The good boy, the one with scout badges and straight teeth, said nothing like this had ever happened to him. That testimony, in the way evidence behaves, widened the rift between accusation and credibility. At trial, the troublesome kid cried when called a liar. The crying was messy and human, and it made him look childlike in a way the jury could not reconcile with the seriousness of the claim. It was the kind of performance that leaned toward a defense verdict because the case, as assembled in public, was brittle. The day before closing arguments, I met with my client in the back room of the courthouse. Paper cups and fluorescent lights and a taste of cheap coffee that sticks in your teeth. I went over the closing with him, rehearsed tone and emphasis, and told him what to expect. He sat like a man used to being believed and then, quietly, asked whether what he told me could ever be shared. I said it was protected, part of what makes the attorney-client relationship something that can be relied on in a courtroom. He nodded, and then, like a man dropping a stone into deep water, he said it. He told me he'd done those things. It was a sound that rearranged the room. He did not speak in dramatic confessions. He spoke in the small, terrible language of someone who had been practicing self-justification for years, and then decided he wanted it off his chest. He said he felt bad about it and promised not to do it again. He asked me to believe him in the way rich men sometimes ask for absolution with the currency of confession. I heard it, and my stomach seemed to evaporate. I tried to get off the case. I called colleagues who know the tribunal rules, and they told me, with the legal calm that cuts like a knife, that removal was impossible on the eve of closing. There are procedures precisely because the law does not want to be a mosaic of emotion. I tried to imagine a plausible recusal motion and found the edges already sealed shut. Ethics opinions are precise and unforgiving about when you can step away. The system, at that moment, felt designed to keep people boxed into obligations even when the obligations chafe. I won the case. The jury found for my client in the way juries sometimes do, when credibility collapses on one side and the evidence is otherwise neat. My office celebrated in the cheap manner of people who love victory because victory is what pays the bills. I left the courthouse with a verdict and a hollow in my chest where a different outcome should have lived. I carried the confession like a pebble in my shoe for weeks. It made the walk to my car uneven. Winning a case does not always feel like justice. In that matter, it felt like being part of a machine that polished a surface until the shine obscured the scratch underneath. The boy who had been called a liar went on with his life as best he could, carrying whatever truth and consequence a small body can be given. The foster father continued to be a man whose outward life matched the image people preferred to live with. I went home and found that the thing I had gained was not relief, but an uncomfortable knowledge that the law had protected a secret. Years later, when I taught students about advocacy and ethics, I used that case as a quiet classroom. I told them about the neatness of evidence and the mess of people, about obligations that are technical and obligations that are moral, and about how sometimes those obligations pull in different directions. I stopped taking certain kinds of cases after that because I could not sleep well anymore. Winning had cost more than a week of courthouse hours. It cost the idea that the adversarial process necessarily makes the world better. I kept doing the work for a while after, because habits are heavy, but the story sat in the corner of my mind like a lamp with a cracked shade. It threw light on certain corners and left other things in shadow. The law had done what it promised to do that day. It had protected a client and followed procedure. It had not, in my reckoning, made anything like right.